Okay. All right.
Hello, good morning,
All right. Good morning.
good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is when you're watching.
5 o'clock somewhere.
It's true.
Okay. Today we are June 16th, 2022. Episode number 13.
Day before Dave's birthday.
Yes, it is.
Guess what? It's, well, 12 minutes before 5 o'clock in Kenya. I had a feeling, so I thought I'd check it. 5 o'clock somewhere. Our kids live in Kenya, and it's almost 5 o'clock there. Anyway, just small trivia. And it's Dave's birthday tomorrow, which is also trivia, not so small. And
And now you know.
now you know.
All right, let me share the screen here. We are going live into the Mechanic to Millionaire Facebook group, which is fun. And if you want to be a part of that group, just search it out on Facebook, Mechanic to Millionaire. And then,
Two or the word two?
what's that?
Is it the word or the number two? It's the word, right? T-O.
Okay, let's start. I think we left off here in purple because that's your favorite color. Just looking at that word, those two words, individual application, the principles are um, universal, but they're unique to the individual as far as how we want to apply them, in what way, what manner, what outcomes we want to have. And that's complete freedom, especially when you can be able to get the outcomes that you want to have. So rather than looking at laws or principles as binding, they're actually freeing because they actually they actually enable the individual to express themselves the way they would like to be expressed. So in one sense, it seems like it's a ball and chain, but on another sense, it seems like it's a wide open space. And I guess it is. That's why you got to be humble as far as it being restrictive. There are lanes that you have to stay in order to get these laws to work for you. Like the law of compensation would never take advantage of anybody in a transaction. It would never be deceiving. It'd never be hurtful. It'd never be a win from one perspective. Both perspectives would win. So all parties that are involved, it wouldn't be a one-sided deal. And so I guess in that manner, you couldn't express yourself freely if you were out to, you wouldn't express yourself principally based according to these universal principles if you're out to deceive somebody or take advantage of somebody or manipulate or antagonize somebody. Then the principles won't work for you. You might get away with that transaction and actually take advantage of somebody, but it will come back. Like they say, karma, it'll come back to get you. It's a sandy foundation. And so it can't be built success upon success. There will be a negative result that comes back to you in one way or another. So in that way, I guess it is restrictive. You got to be nice, but that's a principle of love. And and maybe some people need to work on that, but I think in most cases, at least to the listener, the regular listener here, is going to be somebody that wouldn't want to intentionally take advantage of somebody. So I think that's good. Any thoughts on that?
Well, just as a Bible application, which is, the Bible, whether it's, scripture or not, to people that are listening, it is the most widely read book across the ages. It's got a lot of really awesome applicable principles in there. And I was just studying the book of Samuel about King Saul, and he was chosen to be the king because he was a humble follower of the principles that God had laid out. And then there came a point where I guess he offered a sacrifice, but he wasn't the one that was anointed to offer the sacrifice. But since he was the king, he's like, I'm doing the same ritual that's always done. And so that was like the individual application, but outside the boundaries. So he was reprimanded because he wasn't the one anointed to offer the sacrifice. He offered it anyway. And he's like, well, what's the big deal? We offered the sacrifice, it was done. But that became the beginning of the downfall of those people, because and at first it was like, well, yeah, we won the battle. And I think they might have even won a few other battles. I'm not really great at the details of the Old Testament, but anyway, it was just a simple little thing in the eyes of a lot of people. The sacrifice was offered. He's the king. He can do whatever he wants. We won the battle. We're celebrating, but it wasn't done within the bounds of the principle, and ended up becoming the beginning of a lot of problems. So.
Yeah. Coda's joining us in the podcast. Sounds like
Yeah.
can hear him barking. So must be somebody walking by with their dog. A lot of people walk down our street in the morning. Yeah, so knowing the principles is empowering if we submit to them. I think that's kind of like the human psychology too, right? Like looking for things that we have to submit to probably isn't a natural, normal part of human psychology. Looking for something that Coda um, that seems like it's going to tell me what to do or restrict me in things that I have to do. You look at, and then literally following them. Like it takes discipline. Like you think of working out and exercising. On one level, somebody who knows they're going to be empowered, they'll go out and get a trainer, and they'll have that trainer teach them how to do the exercises correctly. And so that you're going to get the best result. You're not going to hurt yourself. That's wisdom and that's intelligence. Like looking for somebody, but then you got to submit to them, right? So there's a sense of humility. And a lot of times when we want something, we'll do that. But when it's not necessarily in alignment with what we want and the way that we want to go about getting things, then that's when we tend to resist. But it's wisdom in understanding these principles and these laws, or we could even call them commandments. And you take somebody, out off the street, in society and say, hey, do you love the commandments? And do you want to like obey them and like, make them a priority in your life? And I would say in certain environments, a lot of people would say no. They would probably even give you some foul language that goes along with that in, their response. However, if it's something that they want and something that they want to accomplish, then that's a total mind shift. Like there's a mind shift. And I think that's a paradigm in society that has been created that would cause somebody to react that way and not go and look for these commandments, because commandments are the same thing as principles. And so the commandments would fall under the umbrella of that. But that connotation that it gives people and the paradigm that's been built around that, they resist it. And therefore they're to their detriment, to their self-sabotage. And nobody wants to do that to themselves. It's just the way that that erroneous belief, that erroneous paradigm. And we talk about that a lot in the first season of the podcast, is that a lot of error has been built into our philosophy on life and how we think it works and all the different dynamics of it, how religion plays a role and those erroneous paradigms that we have. We all have them. The goal is to be exposed to the truth, discover it, have a little aha moment about it, some insight that changes the way we see something. And then Bob Proctor said he was taught by a gentleman over dinner that we can then reevaluate that new understanding with our old understanding in which one seems to fit better, which one seems to be more truthful, which one seems to advance my cause. And then we can then adopt and adapt that new belief. So we can discover, evaluate, consider it, and then make any adjustments that we need to at that point. So then the erroneous ones, as we're exposed to the truth, and what is truth? Well, truth is immutable, right? Regardless of our like, there's a lot of opinions in the world right now about truth and different factors of truth or different dynamics. Just because they might fight to the death in what they believe is a truth doesn't necessarily make it true. Principles are true. The law of gravity is true. No opinion's going to change that. And so it gets really confusing at some point, looking for that truth and what is truth. But man, once you start to evaluate it and adopt it and try it out, experiment with it, does it produce a good result? And I would even say, I'm probably going down a rabbit hole here a little bit. Some people are adopting truth based on even they're experimenting with it, and they're losing their reasoning ability, like common sense reasonability seems to be going out the window, because we have our mental faculties are reason, intuition, memory, the willpower. What else do we have? Two more. Intuition and perception. So it seems like that reasoning ability on a common sense level is going out because other people are teaching falsehoods as though they were true. And so people who haven't quite built that intelligence, maybe that experience, have enough insight, are accepting it as true. And then regardless of their outcomes, and regardless of the foreseen outcomes, they still adopt it as true, even though those outcomes would be a negative result. Does that make sense? And so I think, one of the sayings of the future is that people will be running to and fro, trying to find the truth, and won't be able to find it. The critical... I would say the resolve to that is going back to some of these foundational philosophers that have written books, like Charles Handel, Neville Goddard, Sterling W. Sills. There's some foundational, traditional personal development when it comes to thinking, and even Bob Proctor, I would say, because he's based on those old, not just traditional, but traditionally true principles that are immutable. And so if you're not exposed to those, you wouldn't even know how to see the contrast between truth and error. And again, that goes back to I don't know if this is the right term, Judeo-Christian or those foundational truths that are taught that seem to be eroding away in today's society. It's going to be really difficult for the upcoming generations and those who have not even built their foundation on immutable truths. So that's, I think, what we're doing this for, is to try to help establish what are those immutable truths, how can I apply them and get the results that I'm wanting. And as we strive to apply them, are they working? It says you shall know, what is it? Something by the fruits, you shall know the...
By their fruits you shall know them.
By their fruits you shall know them, right? Yeah. So I want to start getting into, and he's going to here in the book, getting into what are some of those immutable truths. So like the law of attraction, the law of compensation. It isn't free for us to decide what's of value by my own estimation. We have to be able to measure that against the truth and the definitions of what is the law of compensation. That then gives us the freedom to work within that truth with the different rules that are applied under different circumstances. But the foundational truth of it, the definition of the law of compensation, that's not free for us to interpret. And that's why it's important to be able to have a source that's going to be able to reveal to us what are those truths. And then again, by their fruits you shall know them. So anyway, that's like the big battle today. That seems to be the big challenge today, is what is truth? And truth is immutable. I know there's a saying to that. Truth is something, truth is, but I don't remember what it is off the top of my head right now. But there is a sure foundation of truth, and truth is not left to our personal interpretation on the definitions of what that truth is. That makes sense. Kind of. I feel
There's
like
a list of brain facts. One of them is that you can believe something with a great deal of conviction and still it's not true.
right.
Or vice versa, you can disbelieve something with a great deal of conviction and it doesn't mean it's not true, it still is true. And one of those, I mean, if you get to the core of it, I think part of what makes it difficult for some people to accept truth and start looking for their own truth, I guess, is that looking inside is really difficult work. It's also kind of boring and really slow moving a lot of the times. Like, to equate it to the workout just really quick, I've been, I didn't learn how to work out correctly. I didn't learn how to use out the right muscles, and the muscles that on the outside that I could see I was using, but the ones on the inside, the deep core muscles that I didn't even really know existed, I didn't know how to work those, and ended up getting injured. And so I hired a kinesiologist that knows. And my number one exercise was to breathe, and to breathe in a specific way. And because it was hard, it's hard to breathe correctly, by the way, especially if you haven't been trained to do it well. It's hard. It takes a lot of effort. And so because breathing was hard, was embarrassing, but it was also, you have to get still and take time. And life's so busy. I don't have time to just lay there and breathe. I want to get my workout in. I need to exercise. And so I would avoid breathing for a very long time. I mean, in the length of time I've been working out with him, for the majority of that time, I wouldn't do the breathing exercises. And then, but he'd call me on it every time because he could tell because I wasn't doing the movements correctly, or because I kept having certain pains. So finally I was like, fine, I'm tired of hurting. So I started doing the breath work, and it is changing me. It's changing the way I move. It's changing the way I feel when I move. My pain level is way down, but I didn't want to believe that simple breath work that seemed so boring and so slow, and it wasn't getting the results I thought I wanted, I was avoiding doing it. And we do that too with, believing truths about ourselves. It's really easy to believe that, to look in the mirror and say I'm fat every day because of what I see in the mirror, and to tell myself that I'm fit, or that I'm healthy, or that I'm beautiful, which is the truth, right? It's not that I'm avoiding the fact that maybe there's some habits that I could look to and adjust, or maybe there's something biologically in the way. But the truth is that I am, or you are, valuable, worthy, lovable, amazing, beautiful, and those kinds of affirmations that lead to the kind of feelings that we want to feel, the kinds of feelings that uplift us and motivate us to go out and to fulfill our purpose. Those take time. They're boring, to review our affirmations every day. And they can be difficult. They can be emotionally really difficult, because if I tell myself that I'm amazing, but my brain is telling me that the truth is that I suck, which, excuse the language, but I think that saying that word can take a broad range of things that we might say to ourselves that are horrible. And for some reason, we want to believe that we suck. And so we can look for all the proof that no, but look at this failure, look at this thing I did wrong. And so we start gathering proof to make the fact that we suck true. Maybe it's an excuse because we're afraid to matter, we're afraid to be amazing. Or maybe it's because doing that little affirmation to train our faulty thinking to believe the truth, which is that we really are amazing. We're God's an embryo. We come from the creator of this world. We come from the most perfect, beautiful, wonderful, powerful being ever. And it's really hard sometimes to believe that. So anyway, I guess my point is the little things that seem like they're not worth doing, they're not worth taking the time to do. So we'll go out and do the big, heavy lifting in the gym without doing the breathing, thinking that we're doing the better thing, and then end up getting hurt and having to start all over again, right? And that applies to all kinds of things. It's harder to do inner work than it is to do the work that looks awesome on the outside, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Um, Along with that thought, and then what I was thinking earlier and trying to express, like some people might say, why is your truth truer than my truth? And first of all, it's not my truth. It's a truth that I've adopted into my life because I've discovered it. It was either taught to me or I've experienced it through, going through it. Um, and I think there's a lot of people that they have something they're resisting when they have that opinion or that kind of argumentative, why is your truth? And it's not my truth, it's an immutable truth. And so if somebody's arguing against an immutable truth, they're resisting something. And that can, again, I don't judge people for that because it could go back to paradigm, but ultimately people are responsible for the choices they make when they're, presented a circumstance. We can't take
we
that
all
away.
do it, right? So how can we judge people? Because we all do it on one level or another. So anyway, go back.
So some people want to become a law unto themselves. And again, when it's something that they really want, then they're okay with getting the advice because they can see how that's going to take them to get them where they want. And without that advice, they couldn't get there. Like when I was working out, I started lifting weights probably about 7 or 8 years old. And a neighbor friend of mine that we were pretty inseparable when we were younger, we'd work out together. And that whole breathing thing, like I've read stuff from Arnold Schwarzenegger. My brother had a little mail order thing, catalog that you can read, and he would show you how to do exercises. And breathing was a big part of it. Like I either picked it up from my brothers or from reading that. But you breathe in when you're coming down on the bench press, and then you blow out when you're pushing up. And I remember my friend and myself breathing out, really expelling that breath. It would come up into our face because we're spotting the person who's bench pressing. So we're standing over him. And I just remember that whole, their breath coming into your face, and nobody likes anybody breathing on them, right? But it was so I remember when I'd lay on the bench press, I would try to shoot my breath down instead of up into somebody's face. But I just remember being submissive to that, right? And so where you're learning that breathing now, much later in life, and I learned it way earlier, it's still an immutable truth that applies, in both scenarios. And so that kind of truth, whether we learn it now or later or never, is important to the results that we're going to get in our lives when we apply them. So I don't want to be a law unto myself. It's not my truth, but I like the results. And then I'm measuring the results that I'm having against other aspects, like my results personally, and then the other parties that are involved. What are the results that they're getting? Is it a joyful experience for them, or is it one that's not? And whenever we take advantage for somebody, we would know that it's not a joyful experience for them. So if I'm going to measure my results, it has to include the other person. And that's where a lot of people go sideways in wanting to get what they want. They're not taking into account the other person. And I know in my business, there's been some very skeptical people on me offering my assistance and helping them to succeed, because if they succeed, I succeed. And there were some people that just could not embrace the fact that I was literally going to give them everything I've got, my time, energy, and effort in their behalf to succeed. They felt like there was some kind of hidden agenda. But there wasn't, because I could play out in my mind what is the results for the other parties that are involved. And that's one of the reasons why I love the business that I'm involved in, that we're involved in, is because I can serve other people in a very integritous and high level so that they succeed, because without their success, I don't succeed. And there's just not a lot of people out there that have been taught that. But I think most people would be able to say, you know, if I was to say the great two commandments are love God and love your blank as yourself, I think most people could fill in that blank. So they know that principle, but they're not applying it through the law of compensation. The law of compensation teaches you to treat other people as though you did love them, as though you did care about them, and you were worried about, you were concerned for their greatest success in the transaction that you're having with them. Understanding the law of compensation would actually, if everybody lived the law of compensation, they would live the law of love your neighbor as yourself. And not only just in a transaction, but in everything throughout the day. So, that might expand the law of compensation and the results that we're, the love that we're practicing in the world with the people we're driving next to. There would be no road rage if people lived the law of compensation, not only in their transactions, but in their day-to-day dealings with humanity. But most people don't even know what the law of compensation is. They're going to interpret that as, oh, that's something to do with money. No, the money's the result. The law of compensation goes so much deeper than that. And in order to gain wealth in the right way in the world, to where it's a mutual win-win, the law of compensation has to be practiced. And a lot of people haven't been taught that. So when we start to create our vision boards and the things that we want and our goals in life, the law of compensation has to be built into the actions of that vision. Otherwise, it's on a sound foundation and it won't continue to perpetuate outward in a way that does more. It's the greater good. More for all, less for none. And so kind of like nature, a tomato plant will continue to grow and produce more fruit. And then that fruit could be planted somewhere else and it will still continue to grow more fruit. We'll know we're on the right track if our actions do that through other people, like it's more inclusive to other people. It's like the ripple effect that takes place in a good way, because you could have a ripple effect that takes place in a bad way. And that would be breaking a lot of principles. Well, not a lot, a few major principles. So the other parties that are involved, is there anything that I'm resisting in being true to myself? So the way we would evaluate being true to ourselves are, am I being true to these immutable principles, these universal principles? And if you didn't know them, and if you didn't know the definitions of them, you wouldn't be able to really measure that. You wouldn't be able to evaluate that. And as soon as I started learning these principles, like the law of non-resistance, I could measure that to how I was behaving, and immediately I could see that I needed to change that. I needed to change my behavior in that. Even though it was an internal behavior, it wasn't an outer behavior like me, taking this flashlight and turning it on. It was an internal behavior that I could see that I needed to adjust. And then as on the inside, so on the outside, as I adjusted that internal behavior based on what I was learning about the law of non-resistance, the law of compensation, the law of assumption, I could see how I could change those behaviors inside me. And then as I started changing those, the outside results started to mirror reflect that. As on the inside, so on the outside. So if I'm governing myself based on the inside, on these principles, how is that going to cause me to treat other people on the outside, turning the flashlight on, the actual physical actions? Well, if I'm refining my actions on the inside, that behavior, and I'm starting to govern my life and starting to practice those things that I'm learning inside me, then when I'm interacting with other people in the outer world, they're going to be in harmony. And what that does is it sets up a whole law of attraction and that whole, your results that you're getting in your life. And so when I heard take 100% responsibility for the results that are taking place in your life. It made more sense to me when I understood the internal behaviors that I could adjust based on. Does that make sense? So
Mm-hmm.
it's thinking, but it's also feeling, and there's also pictures that go along with it. There's a whole world that happens on the inside. Some of those pictures they show, like you can Google pictures like images, and there's some where it shows all this stuff that's going on inside the person's head. Like there's all of this stuff above them. That whole world is happening in us, and we're responding and we're behaving according to that world that goes on within us. And I realized I could change that whole behavior and that whole world on the inside. And as I did that, it absolutely changes how I'm going to my behavior on the outer world, how I'm going to act with people and discuss and talk and things like that. So I don't know, kind of abstract, but not.
It's very applicable. I mean, it's always very applicable, but right now, um, we go along, and we're living the laws, and we get used to the results looking a certain way, and then the results start to change, and it can kind of feel like a dead end, or like, why is it not working anymore? And I think that's a divine thing. Because as soon as we start thinking that our perception of something is the right way, I think God does a really good job of teaching us that men, like human beings, don't really understand everything in the fullness of it. So we understand the truth and we apply it, and it looks like it's working, and then it starts to look different, or it seems like what we're doing isn't working anymore. And I think that gives us an opportunity to step back and remember, okay, what is the law? What is the truth that I'm following? Where is it that I'm going? And I think right now with the economy, the price of gas, for example, I can be looking at my vision board, and I can be thinking about the law of abundance, and I could actually be having been experiencing the law of abundance for a while, and wow, it really works. And all of a sudden it's like gas prices are crazy, and that makes the price of food go up, and then there's this the supply is going down, and it's really easy to focus on those things and to notice them and to start feeling like, is abundance really true? Maybe it doesn't work anymore, maybe blah blah blah. And I was at the gas station the other day, and filling my tank that used to cost $50 cost $100 right on the dot to fill my tank, and thinking, my goodness. And then I closed my eyes for a second, and I took a breath, and I opened my eyes, and I looked around me, and I saw the sun and the rays of the sun just expanding out beyond. They were focusing right on this tree with a little bird, but also expanding beyond. And then I looked next to me, and there was this field of things just growing. Like there were weeds, but there were also wildflowers, and just abundantly growing. And looking and seeing people just all over, and there's this abundance. And then in my mind was, remember the tomato and the seeds, and remembering that gas prices and money in and of itself, that's human economy. And yeah, there is an abundance, and it is the way that we interact with each other. And at the same time, the Lord has a whole different economy, and money is a way that human beings have tapped into that. But there's so much more, and I felt this breath come over me of like, there is no such thing as scarcity in the universe. God is abundant. There's abundance all around me. And maybe the way I'm used to doing abundance is changing, or at least, something's going on there. But the law of abundance still exists, and God is still really abundant. And maybe humans will have to adapt in the way that we tap into something, or maybe the results that we're getting, again, we think that that's what the law means, but maybe it was just a sign that we're on the right track, but there's still a whole bunch more to learn. There's still, tons of other ways to apply the same law to experience even more results in our lives. And that's, true with everything. We can be heading down a path thinking we're going the right way and then realize, oh, this path was actually a means to my goal. It wasn't my goal. So I back up, remember what's the law, what's my goal, and then keep going and let God show me what the truth really means, and I've learned a piece of it, but there's still a lot more to go that I don't know. I think it would be a fun challenge to offer, even to like open to whether if you're focusing on gas prices or whatever it is that you're focusing on, to maybe just take a pause and look around and see what else is there. Maybe just looking for abundance. Like the time we went, you were like teaching me the law of attraction at that point. You're like, let's go and let's look for, I think, a mosquito or something. And we live in the desert, there aren't mosquitoes, and I was like, okay. We were focusing on looking for a mosquito and ended up finding a picture of a mosquito on a repellent bottle. And you're like, look, there's a mosquito. So I was thinking a mosquito, right? But it showed up in a different way. But how many times do I look at a mosquito repellent bottle? Never. So it shows up sometimes in different ways. And I just think it's a fun challenge for me if I'm feeling myself stuck or frustrated or feeling different than the way I want to feel, just stepping back, taking a breath and opening my eyes again to look in a different way than I'm used to looking for what it is that I'm looking for. So
Yeah, that's a really good point. We're 6 minutes over. I just want to show one last thing, and then we'll cut it off there. Um, so we're just like preparing the soil to become aware of some guidelines on how to self-govern. So this is a lane right here, and we know if we stay in our lane, we're safe. So the more you start to stay within the lines of self-governing in relationship to principles like the law of non-resistance, the law of assumption, the law of consistency, there's probably about 6 or 7 laws that once we really dive into the definitions of them, they really start to change the results of our lives when we do this, when we govern ourselves. So that whole inner world that's going on, it started to really awaken to me. Like it's always had been there, but I didn't see it in the way that I saw it once I started getting the definitions of these different internal way of governing ourselves in both thought, images, expectations, all of that stuff that goes on the inside. I wasn't governing it. What I realized was I was all over the place. I was going into head-on traffic based on this whole governing ourselves and staying in the lane. And once I learned the definitions, once I learned that pearl of great price, it was like, in all thy getting, get understanding. Once I started to become aware of it, I started staying in the lane. And like Carrie said, I'm not perfect at it, but I'm better than I used to be. I don't go into head-on traffic anymore. A child that doesn't never driven a car before and doesn't understand the traffic laws, they would totally go into head-on traffic and totally like put their life in jeopardy and everybody else's, not just their own. Whoever else was in the car and who was in the other car and who was in the car behind that car. We can really cause a lot of destruction by not being aware. And we're seeing that in the world right now. People who are not governing their lives based on principles and staying in the lane. And it's going to cause a lot of, pain in a lot of people's lives, not just, not just their own. And so it's exciting to start to look for those because then we start to get the results that we're wanting in our lives. And we could even do that in the midst of chaos. We can there's things that are going to happen that that are going to impact the way we live our lives. But how am I going to live my life within that dynamic can be totally different than somebody else who isn't aware and isn't staying in the lane. And so that's the big, profound message of today, is that with all the chaos, you can still have a sense of joy, peace, and abundance in your life. All right. So yeah, we're 10 minutes over, so we'll just cut it there, unless there's something that you want to just add, your 2 cents. Good.
I just had a funny story of driving in the wrong lane, but I wasn't a toddler. I was 16, but we'll save that for another time. It just making me laugh.
All right.
Anyway, bye.
Okay. See you guys. Bye.